Most have been mostly, the sites for WrestleManias in the past, and to this point, in recent years, it hosted events such as 20, 21, and 22. Being Madison Square Garden in New York for 20, the Staples Center in Los Angeles for 21, and the Allstate Arena in Chicago for 22. So ultimately, despite it not being the nicest stadium ever, according to what I've heard about it back in the day at least, it was ultimately going to be the choice of destination, that is the Citrus Bowl. The stadium has now been renovated and is known as Camping World Stadium, still known by some as the Orlando Citrus Bowl, or just Citrus Bowl, and the stadium has since been the host to WrestleMania 33 back a few years ago. Las Vegas was also a runner-up at landing this Mania. This would also mark the second time in history that WrestleMania would be held outdoors. The only time prior was WrestleMania 9, 15 years before. This would also be the first WrestleMania ever done in high definition, as well as the first WWE event and sports-related title to be available on Blu-ray discs. Just some info I found interesting and wanted to share. On to the show. Sorry.
Very interesting information.
On to the show. WrestleMania 24, World Wrestling Entertainment production. Raw, ECW, SmackDown would be the respective brands. The second tri-branded WrestleMania. This would be done on March 30th, 2008. March 30th, that was just recent. We might as well just say it now. Originally, we were working on this show because we had watched WrestleMania 24 just recently, and we were looking to just get the show done and have it recorded and set so we could just have it ready for whenever we were looking to have it up and whatnot, But somewhere or another, I was trying to use this new software, this new editing software, and it just screwed up the whole entire thing. Like, I just started talking and whatnot. It was like the usual. Then it just started repeating after it, and then it started repeating again. So then, it was just, messed up, and, everything was just, the whole audio was ruined. So we are actually recording and doing the show for the second time.
Yes, sir.
So, we're trying.
I might forget half of my ratings, but that's okay.
We still got them here.
Yeah.
But this was done in the Citrus Bowl, as pointed out, Orlando, Florida. 74,635 would be the attendance figure. 1,024,000 would be the buy rate, down 113,000 buys from the previous year. $23.8 million the gross in revenue. And the commentators would be Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler for Raw, Joe Styles and Taz for ECW, and Jonathan Coachman and Michael Cole for SmackDown. The theme songs would be Light It Up by Rev Theory and Snow by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Match card. There's a pre-show match, or a dark match, which was the 24-man interpromotional battle royal to determine who would go on to face ECW World Champion Chavo Guerrero later for the title that night. I was actually, for the sake of the show, going to watch this, but I couldn't find it online in good quality. On WWE.com, they have a bit of it, but not the full thing. It's not on the network, obviously, but it is on the WrestleMania 24 DVD as a bonus match. I do have it, but I don't know if that disc still works or not. I got that DVD when I was 9 or 10, so I didn't always have to take good care of things like that. So shame on me, but whatever. It's a kid. You don't care. You take everything for granted. The participants for the Battle Royal would include the Great Khali, Kane, Chuck Palumbo, Mark Henry, Colin Delaney, Jamie Noble, Hardcore Holly, Cody Rhodes, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Val Venus, Tommy Dreamer, Snitsky, Jesse and Festus, Deuce and Domino, Elijah Burke, Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, Kofi Kingston, Paul London and Brian Kendrick, Shannon Moore, and Jimmy Wang Yang.
So we got some names.
Yeah, it was. It featured people from all brands, Raw, SmackDown, and ECW. Obviously, they had to bring in people from other brands for this because there's no way they had enough people on ECW to carry something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then Kane would eliminate Mark Henry last and would win the Battle Royal. He'd go on to face Chavo later in the night. We'd open the show itself with the rendition of America the Beautiful by John Legend. Then we'd have the video package, which I've said on here before and I'll say it again. Nobody does this better than WWE. I feel like I've been saying that a lot recently, but that still holds true. I think the Ruthless Aggression era had the best like video packages and whatnot, but the ones they do nowadays are still like pretty great. But I think the Ruthless Aggression era had the best ones.
Oh yeah, yeah, I can agree with that.
Then we have the Pyro, which was great, and the introductions of the event from all of the commentators. We'd have the opening contest, which would be a Belfast Brawl. It would be John Bradshaw, Layfield, JBL versus Finlay. This JBL and Finlay feud would begin as a result of issues between Vince and his illegitimate son at the time, Hornswoggle. After months of Vince trying to show Hornswoggle tough love on the February 18th edition of Raw, this is in the year of 2008, it was set to be Vince and his quote-unquote son, Hornswoggle, face-to-face inside a steel cage. During the cage match, Vince would start hitting Hornswoggle with his belt. Finlay would try to intervene, but JBL would attack him and handcuff him to the cage. Vince would leave the ring, and JBL would assault Hornswoggle while Finlay watched. The next week, Vince would demand an apology from JBL for his actions toward his illegitimate child. And JBL would tell Vince that he's sorry, but he's sorry that he didn't do it sooner. JBL would reveal to Vince that Hornswoggle was not his son, and that Finlay is Hornswoggle's dad. And the whole thing was a scam. Bizarre storyline, to say the very least. They show all this in the video package while JBL is making his way to the ring during his entrance. Then Finlay would come out, and then out came Hornswoggle, who hadn't been seen since the night JBL beat him up in the steel cage. Or actually, I think that was the first time he'd been seen, in terms of like programming, like a WWE programming. In terms of like being like there, in a building setting and whatnot. They did say he also attacked him in his hospital bed, which that did make air as well. So I do remember that. So JBL would try to get the early advantage by attacking Finlay before the bell would ring. The two would then brawl. Finlay would, while he had JBL down, he would start tossing these weapons into the ring, which I question this move. Because why toss the weapons in the ring while JBL is in there by himself when the second you get back in the ring, he can easily just grab one and hit you with it, right? And guess what? That's exactly what he did, hitting Finlay over the head with a garbage can. Then, later, JBL would hit Finlay with the shillelagh, or he'd look to hit Finlay with the shillelagh, but Hornswoggle would get in the ring and distract JBL. Finlay would grab the shillelagh and then hit JBL over the head with it, sending him to the outside.
Knocking him out for a bit.
Another spot that sticks out, and this was probably the spot of the match when Finlay would do the suicide dive and JBL would catch him in midair and hit him with the garbage can lid over the head. Later, JBL would deck Finlay with the trash can, and then, when he wasn't expecting it, he'd launch one at Hornswoggle.
Yeah, that was what a guy.
Great stuff. Then Finlay would send JBL through a table that was pointed in the corner. Finlay would go for the cover, but would only get a 2 count. Finlay would try to hit JBL with the steel steps, and JBL would hit him in the knees with the kendo stick. JBL would come off the ropes, hit the clothesline from hell on Finlay, and get the win. Decent opener. Right winner, as I guess it would turn out, like following this, where JBL would then go from here. It was probably good that they gave him the win here. But decent opener. Despite this odd storyline and whatnot, they definitely made the most of it and put on a pretty decent match, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a match for those two. Definitely for their types of style in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, from where JBL goes from there, it was the right decision. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, so JBL would win 8 minutes 43 seconds. 2 3/4 from the both of us would be the rating. Decent opener.
Yeah, very decent. Well, that should have opened up maybe anyway.
Oh, it totally should have, especially where you look at the place where everything else is on the card. Yeah, this is definitely the correct call. Next, we'd have the Kim Kardashian and Mr. Kennedy segment, where to go quickly through this, Kim would start talking about the Money in the Bank match, and Mr. Kennedy would interrupt and say, just like last year, he's going to be Mr. Money in the Bank. Not a bad segment. It was kind of funny. just because she's just talking and then he comes he just interrupts and he does his Mr. Kennedy deal. She tries to speak again, then he does the Kennedy thing, and she's just, not used to obviously all that, so mildly humorous.
I'm pretty sure she doesn't know a thing about wrestling. She just did it just to...
Oh, probably not, but mildly humorous. Next, we'd have the Money in the Bank ladder match, though, would be John Morrison, Carlito, CM Punk, Mr. Kennedy, Shelton Benjamin, Chris Jericho, and MVP. So we do got some names in this one. One of my favorite Money in the Bank matches, getting into the spots, there was the moonsault spot with John Morrison where he'd take the ladder and would try to do a moonsault with it, and he'd take everyone out on the outside. Creative, but highly dangerous.
Oh, definitely.
There was also the sunset flip suplex spot with Mr. Kennedy, Morrison, and Benjamin. There was also the one where Kennedy would hit Punk with the Green Bay plunge on top of the ladder. Ouch. Shelton Benjamin would climb the ladder, and in the match, he was in position to grab the briefcase, but both Carlito and Mr. Kennedy would tip the ladder over and would send Benjamin crashing through a ladder that was planted between the ring and barrier. One of the craziest things I've ever seen done in a ladder match. As I said in the WrestleMania 23 show, whenever that ladder is wedged in between the barrier and like the apron or the announcer's table, whatever, it does not end well for somebody, and this time it would be Benjamin. Although I don't know who set this one up.
I think actually, I'm gonna probably guess MVP, to be honest.
It could have been, yeah. It could have been. I just don't. I just wouldn't bet my life on it. But moving on. There's the Walls of Jericho from Jericho to Morrison at the top of the ladder. Then there's the backstabber from Carlito to Jericho. I mean, wow, a lot of creativity in this thing. Then MVP would be in position to grab the briefcase to win the match. But then out of nowhere, Matt Hardy would return and hit MVP with the Twist of Fate off the ladder. MVP, of course, in storyline is the man who had sidelined him for months, so Hardy would run in and look to seek and get his revenge.
Oh, he did.
So there was another ladder spot with Morrison that didn't go quite as planned. Jericho would hit Punk with a code breaker while Punk was holding a ladder. I actually think the spot could have done more damage possibly to Jericho than it did Punk, but moving on. In the end, it would come down to Punk and Jericho battling it out on top of the ladder. Jericho would get his feet caught in between the ladder. Punk would retrieve the briefcase and would win Money in the Bank. An absolute shocker at the time. Back then, I probably would have thought MVP would definitely be the guy who would win it. But it was the beginning of Punk's rise to the top nonetheless, so thumbs up for that.
Oh, yeah.
So CM Punk would win. Oh, sorry, you were saying?
Obviously what Punk then accomplishes after his first Money in the Bank win,
Uh-huh.
Does it again a year later.
Yeah, he does. So Punk would win 15 minutes, 12 seconds. 4 stars from both of us.
That was awesome.
Yeah, great. Great Money in the Bank match.
All right.
In the match, they would highlight the Hall of Fame ceremony from the night before. The 2008 class included Jack and Gerald Briscoe, Gordon Soley, Eddie Graham, Mae Young, Rocky Johnson, Peter Maivia, and Ric Flair. Another very good class, much like the previous year. Howard Finkel would then introduce the class to the live audience and attendance and the viewers to the live audience and the viewers at home. Not all the inductees, though, were present due to some having passed away, unfortunately, so they would be represented by their families. Then there was the Todd Grisham in the back. He'd be with Snoop Dogg, who was supposed to be the master of ceremony. Oh, sorry. He would be the master of ceremonies for the WrestleMania, the Playboy Mania match later on. Festus was there for some reason, too. And Santino would interrupt him and state his displeasure for the whole Playboy Mania thing, and Snoop Dogg would then pull out a ring bell that he just happened to have. He'd ring it, setting Festus off. Festus would chase Santino out of the room. Then Mick Foley would appear, and I don't know, that was weird.
Yeah, I know, again, just weird segments, man. The segments weren't good, besides the Mr. Kennedy one. Other than that,